Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. If you have found yourself asking whether handwriting practice still matters in the age of tablets, typing, and AI, this episode is for you. Today, we're reframing handwriting as more than just pen to paper. It's a foundational skill that shapes how children learn, how they organize their thoughts, and even how they pay attention. Now, in homeschooling, we have this flexibility to adapt instruction, but that also means making deliberate choices about how and when we build these core skills. So today, you're going to hear practical ways to approach handwriting without getting stuck in extremes. And we'll discuss how technology and multisensory methods can coexist in your child's development. This conversation matters because the tools that your child uses, whether it's a pencil, a laptop, a speech-to-text app, each of these offer something unique. And handwriting is not outdated. Instead, it's a critical layer in your child's learning toolkit, helping them think more clearly and keep their ideas organized as they grow. And my goal is to help you understand why the balance between handwriting and tech is not an either-or decision. And I'm hoping that you can navigate this balance with confidence in your homeschool. Now, before we begin, I really want to thank Love Every, because without them, this show would not be happening. So you will hear more from them in the middle, and I hope that you can think through what tools can Love Every help to provide me in my homeschool as well. So now let's get started. I'm excited to share another resource for the homeschool community. This is an amazing success story from our sponsor, Learning RX Brain Training Centers. Here's what Lynn from Glendale, Arizona said about her daughter's experience at Learning RX. My child is truly thriving. It has been one of the best decisions we've made for her education and confidence. The changes we've seen are undeniable. The testing showed significant, measurable improvement across every single area. As a parent, watching her transform has been priceless. I was especially concerned because I struggled in school myself and recognized some of the same early signs in her. That's why we chose to act early, and I'm so grateful we did. The program requires both time and financial commitment, and I understand how intimidating that can feel, but the results speak for themselves. It was absolutely worth it. My daughter now proudly tells people, "It made my brain feel a lot stronger," and honestly, that's exactly what we've seen. You guys, Learning RX targets the root cause of learning struggles, cognitive skills that need to be strengthened. Every client is different, and your child may or may not achieve the same results as Lynn's daughter, but connect with Learning RX to see if brain training would be a helpful next step for you and your child. Around the world in their centers and remotely over Zoom, they've worked with more than 130,000 children and adults who struggled with thinking and with learning. So visit learningrx.com/homeschoolot to get special discounted pricing on the cognitive skills assessment and sign up to get additional information and free resources from the Learning RX homeschool support team. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In. My name is Sarah Collins, and today I have with me Leslie Catlett. And I was just telling her, I was looking for a person who could be really knowledgeable on handwriting in this digital world. And I actually asked ChatGPT and threw right at me, Leslie. And I'm really excited to share her with our homeschool community today. So, Leslie, before we get started, can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and your background more than ChatGPT could tell me?
Sure. I am the owner and founder of the Penmanship Lab, and I've been an occupational therapist for over 16 years. And I specialize in supporting neurodiverse students hone in on their handwriting and fine motor skills through an individualized research-based approach so that they can achieve academic success and build confidence and thrive in their day-to-day.
Love that. What exactly does a neurodevelopmental or neuroaffirming approach for people who don't quite know that term? What does that mean?
So basically, essentially, it means using a multi-sensory approach, right? We all learn differently. It's not a one size fits all. So we want to make sure that we're engaging the multiple senses in the intent to help with the learning aspect, whether it just be gross motor, body movement, before heavy work activities before we're sitting down for attention and focus, incorporating shaving cream, incorporating multi types of paper. Again, that's appealing to the students' unique needs. So it makes it easier for them.
So, those of you who have been listening for a while know now why I'm so excited to share her with you, because those are so much of the things that I talk about frequently. And one of the beautiful things about homeschooling is that though we can't every day pull out our shaving cream, maybe some people can, some people don't. And I'm not going to correct that or not, but there are so many beautiful ways that we can pour into our specific children. Now, Leslie, you have a background in homeschooling as well, too, right? So you're coming at this from both sides.
Absolutely. I homeschooled for 9 years, and then the last year and a half, my students have been in brick and mortar. So it was a great experience homeschooling. I would not change anything about it.
I love that. See, and there's not, sure, your homeschool looked very different than mine, than my next door neighbors, than the people who are down the street. Actually, I wish I had next door neighbors at homeschool. There's not one right way to do it. Can you explain a little bit, like, what did your homeschool look like?
So again, basing it off of what your students' needs are, my two boys are totally different. My oldest son is a bookworm and he's straight and following the rules, following directions, and he could self-pace himself and do whatever he needed to do. Our youngest son, he needs to get up and move. He needs to change positions, which again is ideal for a homeschool setting because within the classroom, you're having to sit for long periods of
Yeah.
time at a desk. So he can move around and do whatever he needed to do. And then we were able to provide those multiple breaks. And then again, he needed that multi-sensory approach to help with his learning. So.
Same as my boys, for sure. And I love that you're talking about how there's differences even kid to kid within a homeschool and how we can target specifically our one child's needs. So let's carry that over a little bit into handwriting. So if you were homeschooling for 9 years, I would assume that you taught them both writing, right?
Yes.
So what did that look like in your own home?
So for me, it was cutting out about 5 to 10 minutes a day for the formal instruction of handwriting, right? Not just tracing letters, but actually providing that formal instruction where you're giving that step-by-step verbal visual
Mhm.
cueing to help with the letter formation, sizing, spacing, and placement. That's what it particularly looked like. And people think that you have to have extended amount of practice. No, just 5 to 10 minutes a day is perfectly
Mhm.
fine. And so that's
But
what we did.
super important that you are giving some
Mhm.
instruction. And that's what a lot of our research has showed. There are so many underlying skills. And even within my own homeschool, for especially for my middle son, who really struggled with the visual components of writing, I had to work on those underlying skills. But if I had only worked on the underlying skills and not also taught handwriting, explicitly taught handwriting, our outcomes would be different. And that's what our research is showing too within the occupational therapy field, that we need that explicit teaching. So, was your method, your 5 or 10 minutes, was that the same with both of your boys?
Yes, it absolutely was. And again, switching up with a variety of multi-sensory approach, but not just the pencil and paper all the time, but
Mhm.
including like chalk and chalkboard. Also, you don't have to sit down all the time, standing at a vertical surface so that you're incorporating the ability to strengthen the shoulder girdle for when you're writing from left to right, whether it's on the vertical surface or sitting down at the desk to be able to have the endurance and the strength to do.
Love that. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are like, Awesome. You guys are talking about this handwriting thing, but why does that even matter now within technology and with AI and it's continuing to expand and talk to text and everything else? Why do we even need to write?
Okay, so first let's talk about handwriting being a foundational skill and isn't just simply just putting letters onto paper. It's a full brain workout. So when your kids write by hand, their hands, their eyes, and their brains are all working together. And this can boost attention, memory, and learning in ways that a keyboard simply just cannot. I love technology and it's great. Typing's great. It doesn't give the brain the same type of rich feedback. So when kids handwrite, they have to slow down. They're forced to slow down actually, just enough to think about what they're going to say. They're choosing words, forming letters, and holding ideas in their heads all at the same time. And so again, this slowing down actually helps with their learning, so to helping make it stick.
So what about the kids though that do, their thoughts are going so fast that then they can't get them down onto paper. I actually know several families who are struggling with that if their child is working specifically on these motor skills and composing the word and then also thinking about spelling and then thinking about punctuation and all this, the thoughts are then gone and they've totally missed out on what they wanted to write.
A couple of things, again, technology is great. So you can either have the student record what they're going to say, or you are transcribing what they're going to say, and then they can focus on the writing component on its own.
Love that. Now, you've mentioned like shortly or a little bit about the impact of these motor skills on cognition and on memory and comprehension. Why is that?
It's important for brain development. From a brain development standpoint, handwriting does a lot of things behind the scenes. So every time we're writing letters, we're practicing that fine motor control, the coordination, and the motor planning. So basically, we're saying, okay, how do I get my hand to do what my brain wants it to? And then on the sensory side, we have the ability to feel and touch the paper, and then the amount of pressure that we're using also as we're writing. So that feedback helps the brain fine-tune their movements over time. And then on the other side, it focuses on paying attention, remembering what they're trying to say and organizing it on the page. And so sometimes too, you can break those into smaller chunks. Again, whatever's feasible for the student, make it so. Don't push, right? Because then they'll not have a love for writing, and we don't want that to happen, or feel the pressure to feel perfect. And we don't want that to happen. It's more so practice makes permanent, not perfection. So strive for permanent, again, for lifelong, as a lifelong skill and a foundational skill versus perfection in that moment.
So what about these kiddos that get so frustrated and they want it to be perfect, right? I know that we have lots of families listening thinking about that, or the kid who starts to write and then it gets messed up and they turn over their pencil and they're trying to erase and then they rip their paper, that it then becomes this battle. So how do we work through that with our kids?
You can tell them to walk away, to give them a chance to walk away, regroup, take a deep breath, and then come back. Also, you can also encourage them not to erase. Sometimes I like to not put erasers on the pencils. So then you can't erase. So you have to live in that mistake and knowing that mistake is okay. That's not the end of the world. You made a mistake, realize what your mistake was, and then try to make it better on the next attempt.
I literally use pens with my kids from the get-go because you can't then think of the entire motor plan that you're doing to stop what you're trying to write. Then you're flipping your pencil over and then you've changed everything and you've lost your flow of thought. And so we either start with teeny tiny pencils at the beginning when we're trying to get their grasp, but then we move to pen almost immediately because you can cross that out and just keep going, and it does not change that flow of thought. Yeah. All right, let's talk now a little bit about AI, speech to text, all of that. So what do you think that parents should think about when we're trying to understand these tools and how they can support their learning versus replacing some of these foundational skills that we've been talking about?
I think that we also need to think about, it's not a question of handwriting or technology. First of all, I'm not anti-tech at all. Some of these tools are definitely a game changer. Like you said, dictation, predictive text, and tablets, they can absolutely level the playing field for kids who are struggling. They can help them keep up with the pace of the schoolwork and show exactly what they know without feeling burnt out. But I think it's important for parents to know that these tools don't build the underlying foundational skills, the motor and the sensory skills that handwriting does. And they're great for access. Again, technology is great for access, but not great for necessarily development. So I've seen kids who are amazing touching, tapping. What really are you using? Like, you don't really have to think about that, right? There's not much thought to process it into having to tap or to type on the keyboard. But with handwriting, you really have to think about those skills we talked about, how to form the letters, how to place the letters on the line, the spacing, what am I going to write? And then additionally, the spelling. But the other concern is too, when we use technology, we're replacing the ability to spell. So you have the autocorrection, right? Relying on those tools, which can hinder the student. So being able to write is absolutely great as a foundational skill. So we don't necessarily negate what we need to, again, make it a lifelong skill for other things within our life outside of the classroom. So don't skip the foundation. The key thing is don't skip the foundation.
Start there. All right, I think that's a perfect time to take a break and to hear from our sponsors. And then when we jump right back in, we're going to dive in a little bit more to this change in our thought processes around AI. You guys, learning to read is not just about letters and sounds. From an occupational therapy lens, it also involves attention, motor coordination, visual processing, sensory regulation, and language working together. See, it's not a simple task. So, we also need the right tools to help us to support our kids. The Love Every reading skill set supports the whole child through hands-on materials that encourage fine motor development for writing readiness, visual discrimination for recognizing patterns and symbols, language-rich interactions that support comprehension. The activities are designed to be interactive and meaningful, helping children actively engage their bodies and brains in the learning process. And parents are guided through what to offer and when, because goodness gracious, we do not need to be more overwhelmed. This helps us because we don't need to design or piece together instruction on our own, but we have the right tools to support our kids. So explore the reading skill set at loveevery.com. Now, back to the show. Welcome back, and thank you so much for being here. Leslie, you have mentioned a few times about the pacing within writing and how it can slow down some of our thought processes. In fact, it has to. You've also talked about when we're just pointing at screens or encouraging our children to do so as they're really active on an iPad, how that's speedy, right? It's a totally different pace of thinking. So how do we help our kids and encourage them when they are so used to this fast pace, right, to slow down and practice writing and build that foundational skill?
Again, I think it's about breaking things into smaller chunks. So that depending on what that looks like for each child will be different, but that window of about 5 to 10 minutes to either type their ideas down, go back and edit, and then go write it down, and then, okay, let's go to our next thought. And you can lay it out. I don't know if you use graphic organizers or not, but that really helps students to organize their thoughts. So that could be that too, before you jump on the keyboard or the computer, completing a graphic organizer with your student, they're typing the first point within that graphic organizer and then translating it onto paper.
I love that thought, like how we can break things into smaller pieces. And for me, it's really interesting because I know handwriting is very foundational, and that was super important for my own son. I will link in the show notes to some of the podcasts I've talked about in the past of his own story as well and how he worked through this. But the pieces of slowing down his own brain and thought processes was really important. But actually now that he's older, handwriting is serving almost a different purpose. It's not this foundational part anymore, but it's actually what helps him to hold his attention when he is listening to lectures or to the people who are talking to him, even church sermons, anything like that, because it gives him that motor component of attention that I don't want him to have his screen out in the middle of church. Right. It's not the time or the tool, but he needs something to keep his hands moving. And interestingly, my daughter, who is she's looking at colleges, she has several friends who are at different schools. There are some classrooms in their colleges that are allowing still computers, obviously, whatever, There are literally some of her teachers, and this is her friend that goes to the St. Joe's College, actually, that only allows them to bring in spiral notebooks because they don't know what to do with AI and how to make this happen. And so there's this group of people that are like, I don't know, but I don't want to hold them back. We don't want to hold our kids back from anything. Are you seeing within working within the penmanship lab, are you seeing older students who do not know how to write and what happens there?
I think it's not necessarily much about how to write, but it's the putting their thoughts onto paper and organizing those thoughts, in addition to like spelling and punctuation.
Yeah. And so, how are you working with them?
So sometimes it's more so about, again, chunking it. So if there is a struggle with legibility, we do first focus on that. And then we move towards being able to put your thoughts onto paper and then going back and editing for spelling and punctuation and capitalization. So again, breaking it up so they're not overwhelmed. We're focusing on one component at a time. So then when it comes to you having enough confidence to apply all of them at the same time, you can, but knowing that you have the option to break it up if you need to.
And do you feel like older students are willing to go back and work some on handwriting, or are they like, Mrs. Catlett, I don't know what you're talking about and not a chance?
Some really are because they feel embarrassed. Again, some schools and classrooms, they still do handwrite. So when they have to turn in an assignment and the teacher is, I can't read it, they feel embarrassed. So there are some students that really do want to work and hone in on their handwriting skills to make an improvement.
Okay. So for the parents whose kids are giving this, no, why? What's the purpose? How can parents explain this to their kids? Let's talk like the little ones and then bridge that gap all the way up. What are good questions to ask or ways to talk to their children about this?
I think it's more so about disguising it. I don't necessarily think you have to explain the why, but just making it fun. Because if you make it fun, they don't really know the reasoning behind it, unless the older students why. Then you can explain. There are older students that will ask the why, of course. Younger students, they won't, but making it fun, regardless young or old, is the key. So that way you don't have to worry about getting pushback. So making it fun.
I think that's such an interesting concept because at first when you started talking about it, I was like, my daughter asked me why all the time, but she was just asking me why for anything. She wasn't asking me why, like, why do I have to do this versus typing? Because she didn't know there was a difference. This literally is hitting my brain right now. Because I think what I told her was like, you have to do this to build. I gave her the typing may not always be around, but that's not the question she was asking, I bet. She was asking just a general, why do we learn this? Like everything. Huh. So if I had, this is one of those moments that I've got my own aha from this. If I had, instead of explaining technology and explaining the actual motor skills portion to her, it was like, because I really care about your thoughts and that you can get them onto paper. That probably was more of what she needed. I should go ask her. Remember when you were 4?
I feel as teachers and parents, we hold the hats and we learn through our experiences with our own children. And that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
The beauty of it, that we can learn from it and we are able to provide what they need, whether it's what we think is right at the moment versus later, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. You have the opportunity to provide that for your child. And that's truly something that a lot of parents can't say that they can do, right? They rely on the school system to teach their child. And you, and other families are able to provide that one-on-one, regardless if it's right or if it's wrong. Like, you learn from it, but then you're building on skills that they wouldn't otherwise be able to obtain within the classroom in brick and mortar.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. So as we've been talking about this, even the explanations, everything, how can we balance learning handwriting and learning assistive technology or technology as well so that we are supporting our kids specifically without removing these important developmental experiences too early? Like, we as adults, we have a different perspective. How can we monitor that and balance?
So I think that for us as parents, we want the best for our children, right? We want to prepare them. The idea is to prepare them. So how I like to describe it is building a toolkit over time, right? In the early grades, we're really focusing on handwriting to build that foundation, how to form the letters, how to space words, how to sit and write without falling apart for 2 minutes. As the kids get older, we're starting to layer in typing more intentionally. So by the middle school years, you see it a lot more individualized. So some kids are leaning heavily on typing and, like you said, assistive technology for bigger projects. And that's fine. But we still want to make sure that we're using the handwriting for quick tasks like note taking and things like that. And then we have to consider those with learning differences. So we're almost always doing both. We're working on skills in short, manageable bursts, like we talked about, or so the brain can help with that body keep growing. And while we're also using technology, give them a fair access to whatever curriculum that you're using. So I often tell parents, access without skill can be limiting, and skill without access can be exhausting. We're aiming for both.
I feel like I need to write that one down. That's so good.
A child who has tools and enough underlying skills to use them confidently, again, we want to prepare them. We're not always going to be around. So how are we preparing them? What are we putting in their toolkit that they can use when they need it?
That's so beautiful. Especially thinking about these are just the tools, right? There are so many tools that are out there. I want you to have handwriting. I want you to have typing. I want you to be able to push on your iPad. I want all of these different things that you're going to use at different points in your life. But I never want you to not be able to do something because we haven't built those foundational skills.
And then being able to understand when they need to use which one. That's the idea too. You can identify for yourself when you need to use a certain tool.
Yeah, which is sometimes where that why can come in. We've talked with my son specifically about you need to write when you're taking notes and when you're trying to hold your attention on something, because you need that motor pattern or that motor attention so that you're not wanting to get up and run around. It is that little piece to help to hold your attention there. So he can say some of that why, but in a different way than somebody else might need that. That focuses back in on their uniqueness. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdoms. Just one final last thing. What do you think that we could say to parents who are feeling pressure to either push handwriting or abandon it altogether? What is your final thought with that?
I would first say just take a breath. You are not failing if your child's handwriting isn't perfect, which we talked about. And you're not failing if your child uses a Chromebook technology, tablet, whatever they may be using. We're all trying to figure this out in real time. In real time, we're all trying to figure it out. So just take a deep breath. You don't have to live at the extremes.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you if they have more questions or really are thinking about their own children might benefit from your expertise?
You can visit my website at thepenmanship.lab.com or catch me on IG at _penmanship_lab.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sarah.